I spent 100 days in Minecraft's hardest and most terrifying mod pack, RLcraft. A world filled with dragons, demons, and all sorts of other nightmarish things, all with a combined goal to make my life as hard and as hellish as possible, as well as trying to kill me at every turn. I mean, there are even some things in this pack that if I look at them the wrong way, they kill me. Just like that, just poof, gone. And then there's some that kill me for minding my own business. Like, sheesh buddy, forgive me for trying to get some coal, that way I can actually see in these pitch black caves and not be insta-killed by a guy who gets mad at me because it's too dark. So now that you have an idea of what we're in for, let's get started. Also, if you'd like to see me attempt this again, but in hardcore and completely lose my sanity over and over and over again, then please be sure to let me know by dropping a like and a comment down below. And if this video hits 5k likes, then I might think about doing it in hardcore. Anyways, without any further ado, let's get into the video. So, day 1 in this unforgiving hellscape. We may not be in hardcore, but I did lock the game on hard difficulty because, I don't know, I guess I like torturing myself. Then it was off to go and get some gravel for flint, because here in RLcraft we don't believe in punching down trees, and instead, you gotta get some flint, break it down into shards, get a stick from some leaves, and then make a knife so that way you can go and grab some plant fiber from grass and craft it into some plant string, so then you can eventually make a very flimsy, very crappy hatchet, and now can finally chop down your first tree. Woo! All that work for a little bit of wood. After chopping down a couple of trees, I broke the logs down into planks manually because everything takes 5 years longer in this mod pack, set up a crafting table and made myself a wooden pickaxe to start grabbing myself some stone so that I can stop using these garbage flint tools ASAP. Once I gathered enough rocks, I combined them into cobblestone and made myself a pick, an axe and a sword, because I'll be damned if I'm going one step further without any form of protection, no matter how shoddy it may be. And it's a good thing I made that sword too, because these guys exist and they will just run at you and attack you for absolutely no reason. So I had to put him down, securing our first kill in this dog-eat-dog world. However, I'm not fighting that thing. Goodbye, my 8-legged friend. Deciding not to attack that guy back there and run off in the opposite direction proved to be pretty beneficial, because after walking for a little while, I stumbled across a Taiga village. And that's absolutely massive, because villages in RLcraft have a lot of loot to help you get started. So I wasted no time and began tearing up this poor guy's house for sticks, that I then used to make a handle and craft a stone saber, because they're better than a sword because they give you a 25% damage resistance and do 50% more damage to mobs not wearing a chestplate. Although I'm not too sure if the 50% damage bonus still works in recent versions of the game, because a lot of stuff got changed and nerfed, so if you see me doing things that aren't good or useful anymore, then I apologize, but finding a guide for this pack got pretty confusing with all the mixed information between each video and also versions of the game. Anyways, I crafted up a shield and some wool armor, that way I'm protected from the cold and have that Eskimo drip, then continued on pillaging and looting this place for all it was worth, as well as getting jumped by some ice water demons who I just hid away from and let the village Aegis deal with. But after seeing the last one get destroyed, I started hearing some swooshing off in the distance and didn't pay it much attention until, well, it paid attention to me by almost burning the house I was in to the ground. Yep, it was a dragon in the very first village that I found. So I immediately began to panic and run for my life, stopping off for a second to gather some wood from this chest right here because I don't really want to spend ages chopping trees down, you know? You gotta get your priorities straight. But after I got the wood, I then ran as fast as I could, hoping to make it out alive and not die on day 1. Luckily, I managed to make my way to the mountains and escape for now when I finally caught a glimpse of this overgrown flying lizard that made me run away a little bit further before deciding to stop off next to some lava and set up a temporary camp to spend our first night, where I crafted a sleeping bag and headed to bed with a dragon less than 200 blocks away from me. But now, before we move on to day 2, a quick word from this video's sponsor, OneBlock MC. Now, if you couldn't have guessed by the multiple videos and series I've done on OneBlock, I'm kind of a fan of the game mode. And that's why today, I'm here to tell you about OneBlock Galaxy. It's one block, but alongside your traditional singular block mining activities, you can complete and hand in quests to help expand out your island, as well as being able to visit different planets around the galaxy to find all new materials, loot, and rewards. On top of that, you can team up with your friends and take on bosses that cycle on a daily timer. So head over to Minecraft and play now with the server address itspoppers.oneblock.net and get yourself a free gift today. That's itspoppers.oneblock.net. A huge thank you again to OneBlockMC for sponsoring this video. In the morning, I packed up shop and continued to put some distance between me and that dragon, although I did stop off to get a better look at it, as well as craft a furnace to cook up some of the food that I had, because I was getting pretty hungry. Whilst I was cooking, I went to check out this wisp that ended up giving me glowing and night vision, so that's nice, I guess. It's kinda useless right now, but hey, at least he didn't kill me, and that's really all you can ask for sometimes in this mod pack. Then I noticed the dragon move and almost went into cardiac arrest, but luckily for me, he went into an unloaded chunk and, well, I won't be seeing him again for a while. Thank you RLcraft for forcing me to run the game on a very low render distance. Or, as my good friend DJ Khaled would say, congratulations, you played yourself. After that very minute victory, I ate some of my steak and continued on in search of, well, really anything at this point. I just didn't want to be near that dragon or cold anymore. But after spending like 3 or 4 minutes scaling this mountain, I got to the top and spotted another dragon that made me immediately turn around and leave, because I can no longer go that way now, it belongs to him. However, I did find some coal after turning around, so at least some good came out of it, although very little. After grabbing the coal, I pillared my way to the other side of the mountain, praying for there not to be a dragon up at the top, and to my surprise, I ended up finding this lovely, peaceful looking oasis that I could use to take a break from the cold, and hopefully the dragons as well, and get a little setup going in peace. So I headed down to it so quick that I just threw myself off into the waters below, and immediately started grabbing some sand, because I was getting pretty thirsty, and needed to purify some water ASAP so that I don't turn into SpongeBob from that one episode. And also because the river water's giving me parasites. Ugh. After the parasites eventually went away and left me pretty beat up with only half a heart left on my head, I set up another little temporary camp and started cooking up some sand so that I can actually make some bottles and drink some clean water, as well as grabbing some wild berries in their respective bushes, because these little guys give you both food and water and are super useful. However, not as useful as the meat from this guy right here that when cooked gives you like absorption 4, I think. And that's pretty big with how much damage things in this pack do to you. Talking about damage, this nymph right here healed me up real good. Once I was all healed up and back at full strength, I grabbed the glass from the furnace, crafted it into 6 bottles and filled them to the brim with water before throwing them back into the furnace to purify and headed to bed. On the morning of day 3, I immediately set out to kill a whole bunch of passive mobs for XP to reach level 5 so that way I can spec into a specific skill to get more XP from it. And that skill in my case was combat, because this is RLcraft and I'm going to be fighting more stuff than ever imaginable, so it only makes sense. Then went and leveled up the attack skills over on the other skill tree a little bit as well. After leveling up, I continued on the search for a village replacement when I stumbled across these 2 battle towers with a small villager encampment in the middle of them. Not the friendliest or safest place, but hey, it'll do for now. And besides, I'd much rather take these 2 battle towers over a dragon any day of the week. Anyways, I went and looted up the tents, finding a whole bunch of medical supplies that I'm sure are going to be just super useful, as well as some arrows and armor in another chest that I decided not to take for some reason. I don't really know what I was doing. But I did find this ground sheep who was just chilling on the floor like it was the casual thing to do. He didn't live. Ground sheep aside, I spent a little while beating up this big dino for some XP and ended up getting jump scared by a reaper afterwards. I mean, it serves me right, but still, he wasn't much of a challenge and I managed to off him pretty quick, getting even more XP that I put to use on leveling up my mining skill so that I can actually mine iron at some point when we actually find it. Then I spotted a bunch of cows over the water and just had to go and kill them. But I guess Speedy Gonzalez here, frickin' Lightning McQueen wannabe, had different ideas and instead it ended up being me who was killed. And well, take a wild guess at where I respawned. Wait. Not here. Not here. Anywhere but here. No. Oh no, not the village. No, not the village. Ah! What is that? El Chupacabra or something? Dude! No! What? And now it begins. The torture begins. Alright, I need to avoid that kind of demon dog over there. Maybe lead it over here to these guys. Uh-oh. 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 Help me! Help me! They're not helping me. No, no, let me in! No! No! Not again! No! No, please! Please! No! Oh, wait, no, he's in the village now, so I can just run past him, right? He's, like, over that side, so if I just run over here, we're fine. No! This isn't even the right way! No! Aegis, kill it or something, please! You're useless! Right, we need to run. Just run. Run. Grab the wool. Okay, we're leaving. We're leaving. We're leaving. After dying to the warg a couple of times, I did manage to escape the dragon-infested village and slowly work my way back to where I died initially, but Usain Bolt was still hanging around and messed me up real good once again. No, he's still there. He's still there. Ah! Go away. Go away. No! 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 Let me... He's still there! Why? Why is he there? After respawning at the village, I just ran back in hopes of being able to make it in time to recover at least some of my stuff. Once I arrived back at the area where Crazy Frog over here was residing, I managed to stay well away from him, and to my surprise, all my stuff was still there. So I quickly gathered it up, put down a zombie, and spent the night out here in the cold open fields. Waking up on day 4, I was just happy to be alive and still have all my stuff, even if I did just lose 2 villagers in the span of like 2 days, but that's okay, because I found this tower thing that I was hoping would be friendly, but the architecture outside was screaming a different message. But I decided to make my way up it anyway, all the way to the top, or at least close to it, to find absolutely nothing but an empty room filled to the brim with a whole load of nothing and wasted time. So I made my way back down and grabbed some berries that I spotted and then continued on the search for a place to call home, at least for now. Taking out a herd of cows in the process that gave me enough XP to level up my mining to the point where I can actually mine iron. That actually wouldn't take me too long to find, because after I climbed my way up this small mountain right here, there was a geode on top that had some iron in it. So I wasted no time and mined it all up, getting a total of 19 iron, which is pretty good for what is essentially one vein of it. After grabbing the iron, I decided to try my luck mining up some coal and ended up spawning in this here geonatch that luckily I knew how to deal with, considering that I've died to these guys quite a few times in the past and in other attempts. Once he was no more, I headed over and healed up at a nearby nymph, and then kept moving along the mountains, finding some random what seemed to be abandoned farm, and after walking for a little while longer, found a mineshaft entrance in a mountain. So of course I cautiously made my way over to it, finding out that it wasn't a mineshaft and instead was a pit that leads to a place where I'm not going right now. So instead of going down there, I broke a load of logs down into planks and built up the crappiest little wooden shack you have ever seen, before throwing a door on it, setting off my iron to smelt all evening, and heading to bed when the sun went down. When I awoke on day 5, I immediately got to work dispatching some more innocent mobs to stack up on some XP. And after killing a few, I returned to the hut, grabbing my now smelted iron to get even more XP that I then specced into my attack, leveling it up to 5. But we need 8 to use iron weapons, so we've still got a little ways more to go. And I also replaced the coal in the furnace with this tallow that I got from pigs, because I'm pretty sure it works practically the same, and well, I don't really have much coal right now, so I may as well keep it. After mercilessly killing even more innocent mobs and dealing with another Reaper, I was running pretty low on purified water. So I went looking for a water source that I actually didn't have to go far to find, as well as killing this Lux Yale for some XP, and to test out whether or not it would attack me back, but it didn't, and now I kind of feel bad. I don't really know why. I mean, if it did fight back and kill me, then I'd feel worse, so you know what, I'm glad I killed it. I'm glad it's dead. Putting my war crimes to one side for now, I went and chopped down one of the bigger trees around this area to see how much wood it would net be, and oh boy, this was a big chunk of a wood. I got a whole 42 fir wood from that one tree alone. Not bad at all. After chopping the tree, I carefully mined up a couple veins of coal, hoping not to spawn a rock demon, and luckily for me, I guess he was taking the day off because it all went smoothly. Then I returned home and began cooking up all the food that I got from the innocent animals I killed today to get even more XP from them. But then for some reason I just had to go out and mine some more coal, and well, apparently he's back on shift now and very, very angry. But I had access to his kryptonite, which is pretty much a shield, and he was no match and went down pretty easily, netting me even more XP and bringing me one step closer to holding that beautiful iron saber in my hands. Then I returned home and spent the evening cooking before heading to bed. Now, when I left my humble little hut on the following morning, I was greeted by something straight out of the Necronomicon. Some Cthulhu-esque meatballs that looked like they were going to wipe me out of existence by just looking at me. So I made the executive decision to pack up all my things and leave. Because if those are going to be my neighbors, then I don't want to live in this neighborhood anymore. I remember when this area used to be a lovely place before the great old ones moved in with all their cult-like behaviors and followings. So I left to find a better place to live, almost immediately finding another iron geode that I just had to mine up, and ended up spawning in another rock boy. However, this guy wasn't the brightest and he ended up getting stuck in the rock, making him just extremely easy to deal with. After gathering up the iron, I continued on through the mountains until I ended up in a forest with a battle tower that I was in no position to take on right now, so I just passed it thinking I'd come back later. Just gonna give you a spoiler alert right here. I completely forgot this thing exists, and I never go back to it at any point ever. Anyways, after walking for a little while, I found this here dilapidated house that didn't really have anything inside of it that was any use to me. Well, except these torches, because they work a little bit differently in RLcraft. So, basically, any torch that you craft is unlit until you light it with a flint and steel, and they will eventually go out. However, naturally generated ones that can be found in villages, houses, and chests and stuff all come pre-lit and they never go out whatsoever. They're like the default vanilla Minecraft torch. So they're just so much better to have in hand. But enough about the torches. After leaving the house, I found this small hut nearby that I thought could have been part of a village, but it wasn't. However, it did give me some iron, so I wasn't too disappointed. But didn't stay long because I still needed to find a new place to call home, and this wasn't it. Now, on my journey, I thought about making a backpack that would be really useful to carry extra stuff with me. However, I couldn't craft one right now because they require gold to make. So, when I stumbled across another battle tower, I thought, oh, maybe it has some in there, and decided to take a quick look and see. But then immediately spotted a stinky spider and decided that I wasn't going to risk all the progress I've made so far for one measly piece of gold, and decided to just leave and continue searching. I'm sure I can get gold pretty easily later down the line. Shortly after leaving the tower, I spotted another structure over the river in a spruce biome and went to start heading over to it when I realized that there was a dragon right next to it. So I immediately turned around and booked it in the opposite direction. Now, rewatching this part in post, I think that there was actually 2 dragons back there, so if there was, then that was a pretty lucky escape from something that could have gone very bad very, very fast. After running away for a little while, I stumbled across another house that I was 100% convinced would be part of a village, but it wasn't. However, this place did have some tools and armor laying around, but I couldn't even use them yet, so I just left because this place was still way too close to the dragons for my liking, and I didn't want to risk another run-in with them. Some more running into the unknown later, and I found a plains biome and this completely destroyed house that was pretty far away from everything bad I'd found prior. So I threw my sleeping bag down here and spent the night sleeping under the stars, hoping and praying not to get deep fried by any passing by dragons. Day 7, the final day of our first week, and I think we're doing pretty good, all things considered. I mean, we have encountered quite a few dragons so far, but none of them has killed us yet, and some days that's really all you can ask for. Anyways, I spent all day digging up the remains of what I presume was once a house, and began replacing it and sprucing it up with new materials so that it didn't look so, well, desolate. After getting a very basic layout all set up, I made a chest and stored away some of my stuff, cleared out some grass from around my house, and planted down my berry bushes. Then headed over to a nearby cave entrance and mined up some iron that I then took back and smelted down with the stuff that I got from the geode earlier. And whilst that was cooking, I made a shovel, dug up a bunch of sand, and also set that off smelting whilst replacing the floor with a wood and stone mix. Before adding some windows and beginning on the roof that I would actually never finish because I didn't have any more of that type of wood, so I just headed to bed. Now, on day 8, I realized my screw up with the roof and not having enough wood, and I was just too lazy to fix it, so I just real quick threw up some dirt and called it a day. After somewhat finishing up the house for now, I began making my way over to a nearby battle tower, leveling up my agility a little on the way over. Now, I'm not expecting to take this whole thing on, but I just wanted to go and get a feel for how hard things were going to be on me, and well, initially everything went pretty smoothly with me breaking the first few spawners with ease, getting a pretty nice chunk of XP from them. But then I got poisoned by a cave spider and didn't know if it could kill me in this, so I panicked and ran away to a nearby nymph to heal up. After recovering from such a ferocious attack, I went back to the tower to break the last spawner on that floor for the XP, but then decided to leave it there for now because cave spiders terrified me, although looking back on it now after playing through it for 100 days, they're actually super easy to deal with and I did not need to be that scared. Although to this day, I still don't know whether or not the spider poison can actually kill you in RLcraft or not. When I got back home, I leveled up my defense some more and crafted an iron saber that I can now use due to being attack level 8. Now, the damage isn't much better, literally adding 0.5 to it, but hey, a small upgrade is still an upgrade. Although, once again, future poppers here, looking back on things, I should have probably made a polearm or a halberd because they're just so much better weapons. But hey, you live and you learn. After acquiring my shiny new iron saber, I went on a mass maca slaying spree, both for the meat that they drop and the XP, leveling up my defense some more, and then went on another spree against pretty much every living thing in my vicinity that wouldn't attack me back, because I really want the iron armor to feel at least some amount of safety, although it probably won't do too much for me. After culling all the nearby wildlife, I leveled up my defense to 7, but then started getting attacked by something that was invisible, I'm pretty sure. I couldn't see it and I was taking quite a bit of damage, so I retreated back, but it wouldn't leave me alone. So I relogged and it seemed to go away, but I have absolutely no clue what that thing was, but it creeped me out and confused me real good. But either way, I cooked up the food that I got from all the poor mobs that I killed in the day and headed to bed. I started off day 9 by doing my favourite activity, which is the complete and utter annihilation of sheep for XP. That finally gave me enough XP to reach level 8 and spend it on the final level of my defense. Now I can kit myself out in iron gear and feel slightly safer. So I headed back to the house, crafted myself a full set of shiny new iron armor, as well as crafting a new upgraded iron shield to replace my current stone one. And just like that, I was feeling quite a bit more confident that I wouldn't get one shot immediately. So I decided to return to the battle tower to try and get some string from the spiders, that way I can make a bow that will come in super handy when dealing with pretty much anything. Once I arrived at the tower, I made my way up along the outside to the top floor because I thought that it would be much easier to take on from the top downwards, considering it's one of the ones that goes all the way down underground. Once I reached the top, I blocked off the staircase downwards and managed to break both spawners up here without anything spawning from them, considering that it's the middle of the day. Now, the loot on the top floor was pretty poodoo, and well, that's to be expected considering it's technically the first floor. So I made my way down to the next floor, taking it on with what I'd like to call the slab strat, because I'm still terrified of cave spiders no matter how much armor I'm wearing. Now, this strat did work pretty good for a while, but eventually I did have to face my fears and clear out the floor somewhat normally, because I couldn't reach the far spawners. After clearing out the floor, I leveled up my mining some more before heading downstairs to progress further into the tower when I had a bomb thrown at me that made me very quickly turn around and leave because I'm not dealing with that right now. And instead, I went out in search of another way to get some quick XP when I found this here mineshaft house thingy. I don't really know what it was, but it had some coal to mine and some torches and iron in a chest upstairs. So I grabbed everything that I wanted and left. A couple of passive mobs and a reaper kill later, and I had enough XP to level up my mining to 8 so that I can now use an iron pickaxe. Then I headed over to a nearby mineshaft looking thing in a little hill to see what it was all about. And the loot in this thing ended up being pretty good, finding 2 golden apples along with some healing items and all the ores in the walls as well. This place was a really nice find. However, it did end up getting dark whilst I was over here, and there was actually a village pretty close by that I spotted, but I decided to block myself in here and spend the night mining up the ores to kill some time. So, in the morning, I made my way out of the mines with all of its loot in hand, as well as dealing with the baby zombie to start my day off right. After dealing with that little ankle biter, I made the somewhat short journey back home and started smelting down the 11 iron that I got last night, as well as chopping down a tree to make myself some sticks and leveling up my magic a little bit before crafting a bow, sorting out my inventory, upgrading my pick to an iron one, and heading over to the village that I spotted last night. And once I arrived, I wasted absolutely no time and began looting this place up immediately, hoping and praying that there was no dragon nearby that was going to get the world record speedrun for turning me into a spit roast. Luckily for me there wasn't, but I did almost blow myself up by nearly trying to open a trapped chest that had some TNT behind it. But luckily my keen eye spotted it just before I clicked and I managed to safely remove it and avoid what would have been a very big tragedy, I'm sure. After avoiding my very explosive death, I activated the nearby waypoint and took whatever remaining loot the village had to offer me, getting quite a few arrows in the process. So now I can actually fight things from a distance. After looting up all the chests, I found a vineyard, at least I think that's what a grape farm is called, but either way, these things are super useful late game. So I just harvested them all up, and after I was done grabbing the grapes, the sun was going down and I decided to spend the night here with the villagers. And in the morning, began making my way back home with all of my stolen goodies. When I got back, I set some water off cooking and then sorted out my inventory a little, aka just threw things into a chest because this is modded Minecraft and I'm too lazy to fix a crappy storage system. So instead of dedicating 9 years of my life to organize every single item in this mod pack into its own specific chest and color group, I headed over to the cave entrance from earlier and started a strip mine, because going through caves in this mod pack is extremely dangerous and I feel like doing a strip mine will be much safer. So I began mining my way down to bedrock because coordinates just aren't a thing in the F3 menu and you need a compass to see them. So I found the perfect diamond mining spot the old-fashioned way by just mining all the way down to bedrock and then counting up 11. But let me tell you, having to place down and light up a torch every 20 seconds or so is extremely annoying, and I will never complain about vanilla Minecraft torch placing ever again. although I don't really think I've ever complained about them before, but either way, RLcraft torches are extremely annoying. Now, almost immediately after being down here, I found some life crystal shards that when you combine 9, give you a heart container and nets you an extra heart. So they're a pretty big find, and I'm sure that I'll not completely forget they exist for the next, I don't know, 20 to 50 days. Anyways, I started a series of strip mines down here in the cold depths of the earth in hopes of finding some diamonds. I mean, why else would I be down here? Now, in my vast mining session down here, I did stumble across a couple of caves, but when I popped my head in to see if there was anything useful or interesting in them, I had demons run at me, so I decided to give them a miss for now. After spending a while down here mining and not really finding much other than some lapis and redstone, I was starting to lose hope and get really cold. But then I finally found some of those little blue gems of serotonin, getting a whole 5 of them, which I can't actually use at the minute due to lacking in the levels. However, it is nice to have them, and I have took my first steps into a slightly more OP world. Some more strip mines later, and I ended up finding another 4, as well as a really creepy noise that began following me around, making me very jumpy. After leveling up my defense some more and finding a couple veins of iron, I finally spotted some gold that I was going to need to make a backpack off in a cave next to some life crystal shards. So I carefully tunneled my way over to them, killing a lava bug thing in the process, and then jumping out to mine them up as fast as possible, successfully securing both of them. Then made my way back up to the house after a pretty lucrative mining session. I started off day 13 by immediately putting that gold I got last night to use by crafting a backpack and then filling it up with some essential things to take with me on my journeys, as well as making a bunch more water bottles and purifying them because you can never have enough water. Now, I know that I can just carry around a water bucket and drink from that, but I kind of want to sip on some non-parasite infested water right now, just personal preference. After preparing my backpack, I went to grab it and got a message in chat making me realize that this whole thing was really not that good. Because whilst I can use it, it takes the slot of my chest plate, and I don't really think that that trade-off is worth it. So I kinda just popped it down on the floor and never used it again for the rest of the video. I'm not out here trying to get myself killed just for some extra inventory slots. It's not happening. So with the disappointment of the backpack, I decided to go out exploring to see what I could find around my surrounding area, as well as to see if I could find an enderman, because I really want an ender pearl. That way I can make a summoning staff that'll allow me to spawn in some boyos to help me out in fights. Now, after walking for a while, I found these really broken and rundown buildings, but they didn't have anything in them, so I just continued on and got some target practice with my bow on these helpless sheep. I swear I've killed more sheep in this one video than like every other video on my channel combined, and we're only 13 days in. After grabbing my well-earned XP from the sheep, I stumbled across a swamp and what looked like to be another village or villager settlement over the water. So I crafted up a boat and began making my way over to it, heading over this little mound and spotting a literal dragon in the water below. So needless to say, panic set in and I ran for my life because I thought that this big red boyo saw me. After making it back across the water safely, I came to terms with the fact that that village is probably lost forever and headed out exploring in the opposite direction. Also, I'm just gonna say, the last time I played this mod pack, the dragons were nowhere near as common. I don't know if they upped the spawn rates of them or what, but I don't like it. After walking for probably not even 100 blocks, I spotted this big tower thing and cautiously approached it, half expecting to find a family of 10 dragons living inside. Luckily for me, that wasn't the case, and this place ended up being pretty barren and empty, excluding a few chests, this sneaky boyo who landed a very cheap shot on me, as well as a diamond block just chilling on the floor. Now, I thought that this building was a very nice looking place, but it was really empty and severely lacking in the loot aspect of things. So I threw myself off the top down into some water below, being greeted by some random iron armor on an armor stand, before then beginning to head back home because the sun was setting and I really didn't want to be caught out at night. Once I got back, I stored away what little loot I'd gathered from my day's journey and waited for the sun to set before heading to bed. Or at least trying to, because a Reaper spawned and harassed me for a few minutes, but I did manage to juke him and get him out of the distance that I needed to sleep, and then headed to bed. In the morning, considering it was no longer the witching hour, I went outside of my house and dealt with the Reaper with ease, with help from a nearby nymph that I did actually end up accidentally hitting with my bow. And well, I've made that mistake before, so I quickly ran back into my house before it threw a ball at my head or insta-killed me with something. Once things had calmed down, I headed back out to apologize, but it lured me into a trap and I got chased by a chupacabra. So it was straight back into the house and I took to the roof to snipe this demonic looking demon dog. After what I could only describe as a pretty eventful morning, I headed back over to the village in search of a villager that was willing to trade me string for emeralds. Because it's just a super easy source of XP, considering that you can break down wool into string and get it from pretty much anywhere. Once I found my villager, I broke all the wool that I had down into string and began spam trading to stack up on levels. After running out, I went and killed some nearby mobs for some reason. I don't really know why I did this, but hey, I'll take the free maca meat. Once my murderous rage had subsided, I made some shears, leveled up enough to use them, and then began tearing up the villagers' houses for wool that I would then sell back to them for that sweet profit and XP. After I was done ransacking this place for the day, I returned over to my good friend String Trader and traded with him for some of the night, racking up on even more levels and then sleeping in his bed. Now, when day 15 rolled around, my string guy was no longer refreshing his trades for some reason, and I had no idea why or what came over him. But my only guess would be that sleeping in his bed was too far and he no longer wants any of my business. Later on that day, after just aimlessly wandering around the village looking at different trades, I spotted this absolutely horrific looking thing patrolling around one of the buildings, so I decided to go and give my string boy one last chance to refresh before then abandoning them all to whatever ghoul now haunts the village and headed home, where I sorted out my storage a little, adding a new chest for important things such as emeralds, diamonds and whatnot, and then just kind of lazed around for the majority of the day. I don't really know why. I think I just got confused and didn't really know what to do next, but eventually I did have an idea and crafted up some throwing knives that I'm sure I'm going to use all the time and not just use once and never use again, and then went out exploring again, obviously having to kill a bunch of sheep along the way because it's just habit at this point. And after walking all evening, the sun began going down, so I set up a bed and slept out here in the wilderness all night and continued on my journey in the morning. But the journey ended up being pretty short-lived due to a dragon blocking my path once again. So I immediately turned around and headed back the way I came, taking out a herd of sheep in the process just down to pure frustration. Now I did end up finding another iron geode on my way back, so I guess this journey wasn't completely pointless. By midday I arrived back home and harvested my berries, stored away some of my loot and headed straight back out in the opposite direction, making my way through this really peaceful and serene autumnal looking woodland that was quickly followed by more sheep becoming closely acquainted with my blade, and me finding another waystone just out in the middle of this plains biome. But then I got jumped and chased down by two of these red jousts that are by far the single most annoying things to ever exist. So I took cover in this abandoned, broken down tower thing, dealing with them and then continuing on my journey. Oh wait, hang on a second, what's that? There was another dragon that made me turn around and run away again? Ah, of course. You know, I genuinely believe that the top two mobs I've seen in this world are sheep at number 1, followed by dragons closely coming in at number 2. It's crazy how many there are. It's literally like a plague that keeps ruining my day. Please leave me alone. Now, considering I was pretty far away from home, I didn't manage to make it back, so instead stopped off at this little house and spent the night there. In the morning, I left the house and spotted this weird lava creature before turning around and heading towards this big building dungeon type thing that I spotted last night. Once I got over to it, I got excited to take it on for the loot, but you're never gonna guess what happened. There was another dragon just off to the side of it, basically saying bye-bye to any attempt of me taking this thing on right now because he was really close. So I did what I normally do in a situation like this and ran away. Now, I do think that this was kind of a blessing in disguise because as I was running back home, I found another one of those small mining shacks and it had 2 diamonds in it. Now, I know that the dungeon tower thingy would have probably had much better loot, but hey, I'll take 2 diamonds for running away. After leaving the little hut, I continued on making my way back home, not really finding much other than this big tree that looked really cool, but I'm pretty sure is useless because I don't think there's anything up there. So I just walked on by and killed a few Silex whilst moving through the village because these little blue fellas are going to be really useful later on for getting a flying mount. Once I got back home, I spotted another Chupacabra out back, so I took to the roof and dealt with him, then cleared out my inventory from the days of exploring as well as leveling up my defense some more, getting us one step closer to wearing some diamond armor. Then I cooked up some of the various meat that I'd accumulated just chilling in my chests, and by the time everything was finished and cooked, it was getting dark, so I went to bed. And on day 18, I decided that it would be an absolutely just great idea to head back over to that battle tower and attempt to take it on again. Now, this didn't go great because there were just so many things spawning in everywhere, including some blazers that ended up landing a very fatal shot on me, marking our 5th death. But when I went to respawn, I was all the way back at the little house where I spent the night the other day because I didn't know that using sleeping bags didn't set your spawn, even though that's kind kind of the whole point of them, but either way, I had nothing and needed to get back to my stuff as fast as possible. So I just ran all the way back with help from some beetroots from the village and managed to go back and get all my stuff relatively hassle-free. Now at this point, someone with half a brain would have probably said, you know what, let's leave this tower. But no, I decided to continue and spent like 10 minutes down here making pretty much little to no progress other than breaking 2 spawners. When I did eventually come to my senses and made my way out, it was night, so I just headed home and went to bed. In the morning, I made a soul gazer so that I can actually start making some progress on getting the knowledge of the things that I want to spawn in and help me at some point. Well, that is whenever I can find an enderman and actually make the summoning staff. With my newly acquired soul gazer in hand, I headed back to the village to get some knowledge on the Aegis that I wanted from there, but didn't know that I can only use this thing once every 5 or so minutes. And then thought to myself, what better thing to do whilst waiting than exploring again. So I went back out, finding another iron geode, and well, you already know what I'm going to say next. There was another dragon. However, on the way back I did spot some doggos, and I had some bones on me, so I tamed them, and now I have some friends. But then whilst trying to get back home, I'm pretty sure I got turned around or lost at some point because I ended up in a completely new village in the snow that had a really big library filled with a whole bunch of enchanted books that were just an amazing find for me right now. Also, I do know about the secret chest hiding in the building. I just didn't at the time, so don't worry, I do come back in like 70 or so days. After looting up the library, I went and checked the skies for any oncoming dragons, thankfully not spotting or hearing any. So I looted up some more of the village, cooked up some water, and got some more knowledge on the Aegis before deciding to spend the night here. On day 20, I got up and left the village to spot yet another dragon pretty close by, before then getting jumped by another joust that made me go into a mad panic because I thought I was about to go and get deep fried. Luckily I didn't, and the dragon decided to fly off in the opposite way. After decimating that griefing joust, I ended up stumbling across a graveyard pretty shortly after, where I almost ended up a few seconds ago. Now, there were chests here, but they were locked, so I just kind of left and kept searching for anything to give me loot, finding this really nice and tranquil pond area that just looked super chill. After taking a brief second of respite, it was back to searching when I found this absolutely massive jungle temple thingy that looked really cool, and I wanted to go check out the inside that ended up turning into a maze within the walls, and I wasn't in a puzzle solving mood, so I left about as quickly as I entered. Some more walking later and I stumbled across another graveyard, but this one was a lot bigger than the last one and actually contained some pretty decent loot, as well as a few mob spawners that I broke for XP that I then put into some skills. Now, I did accidentally end up spawning in this plant monster thingy right here from breaking some grass that was hella tanky, but he didn't move and couldn't reach me, so he did eventually go down. After putting an end to that overgrown vegetable, I looted up the rest of the chests / graves and tamed even more dogs that were just walking around the area, now practically having an army of them. But then I ended up going a little bit too close to the coast and got mesmerized by a siren singing sweet melodies to me. However, luckily for me, instead of walking straight to it, I just kept banging my head against this wall until the singing stopped, and I'm pretty sure I had some severe brain damage. So I just took my anger out on the nearest sheep and then set up camp in the graveyard for the night. In the morning, I wasted absolutely no time and immediately got back on with exploring new lands and killing more sheep. I genuinely don't know what came over me whilst playing this, but I just hated sheep for some reason. After completing my morning ritual of putting sheep to sleep, I spotted and mined up another iron geode before making my way through this forest and into the mountains again, where I got a boss health bar at the top of my screen, making me super nervous. And if that wasn't enough to make me paranoid, I found another dragon on top of a nearby tree, and well, you know the drill at this point. I turned around and ran in the opposite direction, getting another 2 boss bars on the top of my screen that I had absolutely no clue what to do about, although looking back I know that these are dungeon bosses underground, so I was pretty much completely safe from them. But after making my way through the mountains, I found this fully formed nether portal and decided to light it and see what it had to offer. No, I'm just kidding. The nether in RLcraft is really bad. It's quite literally hell, and I am nowhere near geared enough to go in there just yet. I just wanted to make some of you experienced people think that I'm a complete idiot, and well, come to think of it, I am, so let's just move on. After leaving the portal, I found this really rundown house just as the sun was setting and decided to spend the night here. In the morning, it was back to running aimlessly through this world in search of anything useful or easy to loot. After quite literally swimming up an entire mountain, I made my way back down the other side, completing the daily ritual and losing a wolf to fall damage, as well as spotting yet another dragon just over the other side of the valley that I had just walked through. A whole bunch of forest running later, and I eventually spotted another village that I made my way over to and activated the waystone before going and looting this place up, and then took the waystone back to the plains biome near the village where I live, although I could have literally just gone to the village, but anyways, I made my way back home, getting back by sunset, and then spent the night cooking up and sorting through the loot from my days of exploring. On day 23, I wanted to go and get some more XP to level up my skills, so I made some shears and returned to the nearby village, almost catching fire along the way because I'm pretty sure it's the middle of summer right now and it's very hot. Once I arrived at the village, I got to work on tearing up all the remaining wool that was here so that I could break it down into string and make bank. Now I did accidentally break a block of glowstone and it spawned in this Zephyr guy who messed me up for a little while, but once I hid away and ate some maca meat, I put him down with ease. Then I went round grabbing all the wool that was left on the floor and took it to my string guy who was still not refreshed. I really don't know what his problem was and I was getting pretty convinced that he was bugged out. So that evening I set out to find another one, spending yet another night sleeping out in the wilderness. On the following morning, I managed to make my way back over to the swamps and over to the windmill tower village thing that I found earlier that had the dragon next to it. But apparently I completely forgot about all that and went over to it anyways, even doing some trades with one of the guys over here. That was until I had the realization of how big of an oof I just made by coming over here. So I left so quickly that I almost gave myself whiplash. After avoiding a very potentially life-threatening mistake, my travels took me through the swamps and into this really hot forest where I found this little hut that had some zombie spawners in it. And with it only being zombies, I decided to try my luck at taking it on. Well, from the outside at least at first, because there was a stinky guy in there who blinded me. After taking out the spawners, it was time to deal with the stinky fellow in there, so I pulled out my bow and started taking some pot shots at him, putting him down with ease and securing myself a hefty chunk of XP in the process, along with a bunch of loot that was pretty okay. Then I leveled up my skills some more and continued on, traversing through a forest that I never wanted to leave because it just felt so calm and welcoming. It's a big contrast to pretty much everything else in this hellhole. Once the forest sadly came to an end, I spotted this big floating quartz tower and went over to check it out, finding some pretty nice loot in here and decided that this was going to be my home for the night. On day 25, after sleeping much better than I usually do when I'm out in the wilds, I dropped back down to the ground using some leaves to break my fall and spotted an enderman that I was sure to kill, getting the pearl that I needed to craft the summoning staff, but couldn't craft it out here because all the materials were at home. Later on, I spotted this tree on fire and couldn't tell whether or not it was a lava pool or a dragon, so I cautiously approached it to find that it was only a lava pool. But then this flying thing came out of it and I ran a mile. Now, not much else happened for a good while. It was just me running through biome after biome, taking detours left, right and center in search of anything cool or fun to loot, when I eventually stumbled across another zombie hut and decided to take it on, a decision that would come to prove fatal very soon, because as I was fighting the ones inside, another one blocked me in and he was a stinky boy, so it was very scary to deal with. Now I did manage to get out, but once I began to traverse the swamps, this frog came out of nowhere and this man really messed me up, and I died losing all of my items a few hundred blocks away and ended up respawning all the way back in the jungles. But luckily there was a waystone here and I took it back to the plains biome and made my way to the village to spend the night. Once I got up, on the following days I began devising a plan to prepare myself and go and reclaim my loot. And by that I meant going and grabbing some beets and wheat from the village and then running like hell in hopes of making it back in time. Well, it was until this joust became a big problem for me and began beating me up, forcing me to hide in this random blacksmith. And then after waiting in there for a while, I decided it was safe to leave and headed out to continue on my journey, but then encountered something about 1,000,000 times worse. There was a dragon right above me and I never stood a chance, making this my first official death to a dragon. After doing that atrociously stupid plan, I actually returned home and kitted myself out with some diamond armor that I can now wear due to being level 16 defense, so that now I can actually defend myself and tank a little bit more than a poke in the arm. Then I ended up spending the rest of the day cooking up some food and grabbing everything that I thought I would need to actually stand a chance at getting my stuff back. And in the morning, I set out on the mission to recover anything and everything that I can and get my revenge on that goddamn frog. Although it was technically the zombies' fault, but either way, I was getting my stuff back. So after traveling through multiple biomes for the entire day and killing this tree man, I had pretty much no idea where I was, but was hoping that I was at least one step closer to getting my stuff back, and decided to head to bed out here and continue on in the morning. Although I did end up getting lost out here a couple of times, eventually I managed to retrace my steps and get back to the spot where I recognized that I thought was just over to the side of the swamps where I died. And sure enough, after climbing the hill, there was the swamps, and there was all my stuff just chilling on the floor. Now I was kinda surprised that it was all still here, but not really because it was in an unloaded chunk. But either way, I'm not going to complain, and instead just sorted through all the stuff, taking all the useful stuff back with me and leaving the crap in a chest. After recovering from the incident, I headed back over to the zombie hut and put an end to its tyranny once and for all, getting an enchanted iron pick for my troubles. After clearing it out, I began making my way back home as the sun was going down, stopping off to kill this joust and loot up this mineshaft, getting some more healing supplies, and then spotting this absolutely terrifying looking thing just hanging out in the water by the village. So needless to say, it made me run home and immediately sort through my loot and head to bed. On day 29, I crafted some slabs and headed back over to the nearby battle tower because I had an absolutely massive brain idea of how I was going to take it on. Now, I'm going to save us both some time and frustration right here. I used the slab strap, but it didn't really work well, and I spent like 10 minutes down here making basically no progress at all, just slowly crawling and cowering my way through the walls of the dungeon, hoping not to get jumped by a spider. Now, I did get some good XP from this, but then almost died to this guy right here who really beat me up good, making me pop a gapple. That, in all fairness, didn't really do too much because they'd been nerfed. After healing up and eventually coming to my senses, I left and returned home, leveling up my attack some more and using my agility skill points to now allow me to use a dodge move that seemed pretty useful. Before then spending the rest of the day just sorting through my storage, because I mean most of it had already been wasted down in the dungeon. In the morning, I went back to the village to check on how things were going and decided to head over to the jungle village when I got my ears absolutely blasted off by this Sub-Zero event thing that happened. Now I had absolutely no clue what was going on, but ended up cowering in this little shack and taking pot shots at the ice monsters that were literally just flying around everywhere. It wasn't fun by any means, and by the time all of them had been killed by either me or the village Aegis, that were practically useless in this situation by the way, the sun was going down. So I found a nice house and spent the night here, hoping for that to never ever happen again. In the morning, I took in the very lovely view from my second story balcony when I spotted a dragon's nest over on a nearby hill and got a little bit scared. So I made my way out of the house, finding this overgrown insect on someone else's roof. So I put him down and headed back to my home village, running into my string guy along the way, who I actually managed to fix. All I really needed to do was trade something else with him and his trades refreshed. So I guess that entire journey I went on was kind of pointless because this guy was never broken to begin with. With this new revelation, I took the waystone back to the jungle village and began hunting down and mining up every single last little bit of wool it had, as well as encountering these overgrown, angry looking bees who my dogs ended up dealing with. That evening, after absolutely decimating the village of wool, I spotted some debris in a conjoining village that looked like it came from a dragon. So I may or may not have done a little technique called turning down my render distance in hopes of not finding what left that mess. On day 32, I continued my crusade through the village, digging up a whole tent that was pretty close to the dragon thing from last night, but I need this wool, so it's worth the risk. Once the tent was no more, I took a little look around both villages to see if there was any more wool left for me to steal before heading back to my home village and finally beginning to trade with my guy again after like 10 days, whilst chilling in some water at the same time because it's really hot now. After making the big trades and getting things leveled up some more, I returned back home and sorted through my spoils, as well as finally crafting a summoning staff that I couldn't use just yet because my magic was too low. And when I went to level it up some more, I ended up being one level too short. And to top things off, I decided to go and make an anvil that I can't even use either because I need to be building level 12 to use it. Level 12! For an anvil! What? After getting absolutely scammed for an anvil, on day 33 I returned to the village and did some more trading before scanning the Aegis with the Soul Gazer again, and now we only need to do it 3 more times to be able to spawn one in for ourselves. After scanning him though, I'd had enough of the village for the day and headed back home and down into the mines in search of more diamonds, so that I can actually get a helmet and finish off all my armor. Now whilst I was down here, I did find a few veins of lapis, iron and redstone, as well as getting screamed at by a banshee that jump scared me so hard you have no idea. It literally came out of nowhere. Then, whilst trying to leave after that incident, I ended up getting an OP Chupacabra's boss bar at the top of my screen as well. So I guess he's just roaming somewhere around here too. And so with that, I left the mines with a grand total of 0 diamonds in hand. In the morning, I was greeted by a lion thing at my door, but he was no match for the roof strat, and well, he's gone now. Lion attack aside, I made my way back to the village once again and over to the jungle one, because now it's time to go exploring again and see what things I can find out there. So I was sure to turn my render distance way down whilst making my way past where I thought the dragon could be, successfully making it past without being flambéed. Well, by the dragon at least. I did get hypothermia and catch fire and had to wait things out in this water pool right here, but after making it past that area, I ended up coming across a swamp that had a big glass ball in it. But after making my way over to it, I realized that it was completely empty and had pretty much no use to me. So I just made a boat and left, finding a little castle just off the coast that I had to go and check out. Now, this was also pretty pointless for me right now because it didn't have much loot in it and I really didn't need anything it was giving me. So it was back into the waters until I decided to continue on foot, where I threw myself down a pretty deep ravine, absolutely decimating my ankles in the process. But managed to make my way out, and after healing up, spent the night out here on the beach. Then, in the morning, went to check out a nearby graveyard that once again was super useful, just down to the spawners that it had that were practically just free XP, along with some pretty good loot, including some diamonds. After I'd taken everything that I wanted, I got back to running aimlessly through the wilderness in hopes of finding something else, before randomly getting attacked by this hippogriff right here who managed to land a pretty good kick before ultimately meeting his fate, just like this Maka. That then spawned a reaper who came very close to putting an early end to this journey. Luckily he went down first and I continued on, taming a few dogs in the process, as well as finding another mineshaft with some pretty decent loot in there, and a nice village just off to the side of it. So I activated the waystone to it, and then went around looking to see if there was anything of use to me here, as well as finally making a quiver for my arrows, not knowing right now that this is actually a bauble, so I never put it on and instead just carried it around in my inventory. Anyways, I went to check out the church looking building nearby to find an enchantment table inside, so that was a pretty big find, but it has to stay here for now because I wasn't leveled enough to grab it, and so just went to bed in a nearby house. In the morning, I immediately scanned another Aegis, now only needing one more to summon them in, and then quickly took the waystone back to my home village to store away some of my loot before returning back to the new one and heading over to the big library, still not knowing about the hidden chest in there. But at least there were some pretty okay bugs in the standard chests. Then I scanned my last Aegis, finally being able to spawn them in. However, my old ways pulled me back in and I began going around the village stealing any and all wool in my vicinity, giving some of these houses impromptu windows. After gathering up most of the wool, I returned back to my village and did some more trades with my old string buddy right here, but he must have had enough of me or something because he ran off at light speed for some reason. So I headed to bed and continued on trading with him in the morning, still having no idea what made him so jumpy last night. Then I made a quick stop off at my house to store away some of my loot and test out the summoning staff, before then returning to the village and continuing on my exploration, where I of course found another dragon, but I'll take this one. It's been a couple of days, so I was due to find one. Whilst making my way back to the village to avoid the dragon, I decided to head down this ladder into a dark abyss of a dungeon below and immediately began to regret my decision, getting jumped by a lion again, that whilst I was trying to escape from it, killed pretty much every dog I owned, so that was a pretty big tragedy back there. But still, I continued on all the way through a nearby forest when I found this creeper dungeon trap. I don't really know what it was, but I farmed the hell out of this thing all the way until the sun went down, and then I headed to bed right next to it and continued farming it out on the morning after, because this thing is basically free XP. But I did get greedy and very quickly regretted it, because I got a little bit too close and then one blew up, trapping me down here with them, so I scrambled and scurried to break the spawner, having a whole bunch of them blow up on me, including a stinky one that I thought would 100% kill me, but luckily I managed to survive and get the hell out of there. After recovering from all that, I continued making my way through forest after forest and biome after biome, along with killing a few sheep because it's been a while since I did and I had to keep them in check. But then that evening I spotted this stone ball over by the coast with some sheep and a cyclops in it, and well, I couldn't not kill this guy, so I spent the evening sniping at him from a distance, having to head to bed and continue shooting at him in the morning because this guy was insanely tanky. It's a really good thing that I didn't go and challenge him head on. After 10 millennia passed and he eventually went down, I headed over to the sphere to see what loot lay within. And well, it was horrible. Literally barely any XP and pretty much no loot. So I left pretty damn annoyed that I just spent 5 minutes of my life hailing arrows at a guy who gave me literally nothing. After leaving the Cyclops' lair, I set up camp on this little beach to cook up some water and craft a boat before heading out to sea. see. Now, some of you that are experienced RLcraft players that are watching this will probably be screaming right now because this is a very bad thing to do at this stage of the game. But hey, everything went well. I found another castle and an abandoned ship, so it was worth the risk, right? Well, no, because the loot was bad and I just had to head further out into the ocean, making the single biggest mistake of this video so far and probably throughout. I got one shot by a sea serpent that I didn't even see, essentially losing absolutely everything that we've worked for up until this point, because there is no way that I can get this stuff back. And on top of that, when I respawned, it gave me a random spawn point in the middle of the ocean, nowhere near anything I knew because I didn't have a spawn point. So I was cold, wet, and along with that had absolutely nothing in an area where I'm not familiar with. So I made my way to land, surprisingly without dying to another sea monster, and began searching for absolutely anywhere to spend the night that was quickly approaching. Now I guess the RLcraft gods were feeling favorable right now, or feeling sorry for me, because I managed to stumble across a villager mansion that I managed to get inside just before it got too dark. Now this place did have some pretty useful loot, especially for a boyo who just lost everything. It was very accommodating, so I kitted myself out with anything and everything that they had, even heading down into the secret room and the secret room, getting some pretty nice goodies from there, including getting a couple of XP tomes that are super useful if you want to store away some XP for later. On the morning of day 39, the journey to recovery began, with me heading out from the house and starting to look around under the scorching heat of the grueling sun for a way to get back home when I spotted this random blacksmith in the middle of a field, but the chest was locked, so I just kept searching for any areas that I recognized, finding another empty lone village house that had a waystone next to it that was going to work as my way back home. So I activated it and headed straight back to the village, never being happier to see this place. Then I spent the rest of the day re-gearing as much as I could right now, just being happy that I managed to make my way back here, never mind this fast. Day 40 started out with me finding another plant monster that could actually move this time, but I guess he didn't want to deal with me anymore and just wiped himself from existence. Now the reason I'm running through a forest right now is because I went in search of any and all passive mobs I could find to stack up on some more XP. That way I can level up my attack enough to start using diamond weapons. But it wouldn't be my luck without running into a dragon that would stop me dead in my tracks. But hey, I did find this zombie spawner that gave me a very nice chunk of XP before having to leave because they stole my sword and I almost died to them. Then once I got back home, I decided to put my levels into building instead of attack because I wanted to use the anvil to add some enchants to my gear, but was still a few levels off of it. On day 41, I took the village waystone back to the newest one I'd found by the abandoned house because I wanted to go and search around that area to see if there was anything that I could use around there. I'm noticing really quick with this that half of this mod pack is literally just running around and hoping to find structures. So now, after running for about 5 minutes straight, I found another village and got straight to looting everything up. Oh, and also I spotted Juan just chilling on a roof here. Now, this wasn't the best village that I'd looted so far, but it was probably the best condition and best place one I'd been in, so I really liked it here. But anyways, I activated the waystone and then stole this crate, which is basically just a baby shulker box that are super useful to carry around with you, so absolutely massive find for me right there. But then I accidentally hit a villager and made the Aegis here really mad, so had to camp out in this library until the de-aggroed. And once they did, I went to bed in a nearby house. Due to last night's escapades, I didn't manage to finish looting up the village, so on the morning of day 42, I continued looting up everything that I could and stripping this place of all of its wool. After I took everything I wanted, I hunted down a villager that traded string and hit him up for as much XP as possible. That I then specced into building, getting high enough to use an anvil before heading back home. Once I got back, I placed down the anvil, crafted an iron strengthened bow and tried to add the book to it, but was too poor due to spending all my levels on the skill. Oh, and I also looked at making a reforging station, but couldn't do that just yet, so I just stored all my loot away and headed to bed. In the morning, I cooked up all of the food and ores that I had laying around to try and squeeze as much XP out of them as possible, getting just enough to add a Fortune 2 onto my iron pick, then set off back down the mines for the next day to stack up on as many diamonds as I could possibly find, because I still need to recover by getting a full set of diamond armor. So I just kept strip mining down here at Y11, not really finding much other than 3 game crashes and a little bit of redstone. That was until I changed directions and went out in the other way when I found a whole bunch of diamonds and with Fortune 2 made big bank from them, getting a grand total of 43. That's definitely not bad. But when it came time to return to the surface, I got back to my house and found that all of my chests were bugged out and completely empty. So I took to many an internet forum to see if I could find out what happened, and it looks like my world corrupted somehow and I don't have a backup, which means that all of the enchanted books, XP tomes, diamonds, food, everything is gone forever once again. But instead of losing hope and giving up right here, I put what this mod has taught me into practice and just let it go. all of it. So in the morning, I embraced this bad luck and headed out into the unknown, leaving what little things I knew behind, and decided to move my life over to the village that I'd just looted days prior. Moving myself into a much bigger house that I did have to patch up because, you know, my wool stealing habits. Then, once I'd had a basic setup in the house, I put my diamonds to use by making a saber and a full set of armor, finally recovering from earlier, if not more so considering now we have a helmet and sword. After icing myself out, I decided to go and get a feel for the surrounding area and went exploring, finding this tower thing that didn't have anything in it. However, I did spot a villager camp nearby and hit an MLG water bucket off the top of this tower and headed over to it, finding the generic loot that I've come to expect at this point. There was also a battle tower nearby that I wasn't sure whether or not was a good one, but I'll have to find that out later because now it was getting dark. So I headed back to my new home, finding that the village looks really chill at night. It's super nice here. On day 46, I took the waystone over to the other village nearby with the church and stole their enchanting table because I guarantee I'll get more use out of it than they will. Anyways, after securing the enchantment table, I took it home and just threw it down in the middle of the floor for now, and then headed over to the battle tower that I spotted yesterday. Now, taking on the top floors of this tower during the day was an absolute joke, because the only mob that I actually had to fight was a singular skelly who really didn't put up too much of a fight. All I really had to do was just make my way up the floors and break the spawners. The only problem was the heat, but I carry water with me at all times, so it was easily solved. Now, the loot in this place really wasn't that good, I'm not gonna lie, but I did get some decent XP, so I'd say it was still worth it. After clearing out the upper floors, it came time to take on the lower ones that did prove much more challenging due to them spawning a whole bunch of mobs, but the trusty slab strike came in clutch and I slowly, and I mean slowly, made my way through the floors, deeper and deeper, getting a little bit beat up along the way, and eventually clearing it out, finding atrociously bad loot in the bottom chest, and then made my way out, leaving by the morning of day 48. When I got jumped by another one of these insanely annoying jousts. I swear, these things are literally nothing but a slight inconvenience at this point, but I hate them nonetheless. Once he was gone, I got back home and sorted out my loot, including some heart shards that I'm definitely going to forget about for the next 10 or so days. Once I got things tidied up and sorted away, it was time to start working on enchanting. So I went around tearing up all the bookshelves I could find in the village, and then chopping down about half a forest, that I then cut down into planks with a saw, because I don't do it manually anymore, and set up a very basic looking enchantment area down in one of the lower floors of my house. And then enchanted my sword, getting advanced fire aspect 2 and unsheathing, that aren't the best by any means, but are surely better than none at all. Then I enchanted my boots, getting depth strider 3 and advanced protection 1, which is actually pretty good, just down to depth strider, but then the same can't be said for my leggings that just got evasion. After finishing up enchanting for now, I headed out to test my sword, and I mean, it was okay, at least it cooks meat for free now, although I did want a weapon, not a mobile furnace. But either way, I made my way over to a nearby desert and began taking on some of the inhabitants. That was at least until it got dark, and I spent the night over at the villager camp. In the morning, I cleared out a field of nearby animals and a singular joust for some quick XP, and then went back home and popped some enchants on my chestplate, getting some pretty cool ones with advanced thorns and meltdown, which I'm pretty sure makes things blow up when they attack you sometimes. Then I made my way upstairs and looked out my bedroom window at a roof dog whilst I pondered how to actually enchant in this pack. Because there's just so many new ones added, it gets a little bit confusing and overwhelming. But one thing I did know I needed was XP and ender pearls, so I need to go kill stuff. So I set out on another venture, immediately finding a few abandoned structures just outside the village, but they really didn't have anything to offer me, so I just kept going. Until I found this weird crypt entrance thing and headed down, not falling for the feeble-minded traps that were set down here, and managed to get the amazing loot of 4 iron. Wow! After trudging through a nearby desert for a little while, night was coming, so I threw my sleeping bag down and stayed in this ruined house for the night. Day 50 started out with me taking on another battle tower, or at least trying to, because there was a whole bunch of blaze in this one, so I ended up leaving. However, I did find a Bezor bauble, which makes me immune to all poison damage, so cave spiders are now quite literally a joke. After wasting a good portion of my day in that very warm dungeon, I got lost whilst trying to make my way back home, but managed to get back by nightfall. Then enchanted a pick, as well as some books in hopes of getting some good rolls on them, but they were mid at best. In the morning, I enchanted one last book for now before heading back out in search of more loot. And after traversing many lands and killing many Amaka for their delectable meat, I spotted another one of those jungle temple structures from earlier, but still decided that I didn't want to deal with that right now and just paid no attention to it. However, shortly after passing that, I stumbled across a Taiga village hideout in the middle of nowhere. So I made my way inside, freeing their imprisoned gold block, and then moving on, because these guys had absolutely no loot to offer me. After running all evening and finding absolutely nothing, I slept through the night, and on day 52, I kept moving on. Now, in my notes, I said something about a dragon skeleton or wanting to find one, but whilst looking through the footage, couldn't couldn't find anything to back this up, so I have no clue what I was talking about, so let's just move on from that. I made my way through this very cold and very icy mountain biome, luckily getting out just before freezing to death, finding another one of these super chilled pond structures that are always nice to come across, because the lands I've been making my way through aren't the most hospitable of places, so it's always a very pleasant find. After leaving the pond and making my way through a very autumnal looking forest once again, I arrived at the first actual village of our journey out here and began looting this place up immediately, stealing some magma from the blacksmith, but didn't take anything from the chest because it was just crappy iron loot. And, well, the same went for the library that was also pretty crappy, but I didn't really expect much from one of the smaller ones anyway. But then I found quite a big blacksmith in this village that would become extremely useful later on, although the loot was still pretty bad. But just as I was about to leave, I got a message in chat saying that the blood moon was rising. That means that I'm not sleeping tonight and things are going to get extremely dangerous. So I quickly activated the nearby waystone and headed back into the blacksmith to spend the night there, because it just seemed like the most secure structure in the village. And oh boy, was this night eventful. There were so many mobs outside my building, fighting both the Aegis and each other, even some trying to clip through the wall to get me. And now if it wasn't obvious enough with me being in the snow biome, I was freezing at night, so I had to pop outside and grab some netherrack from the furnace fire thing, and then take it inside and light it up in an almost entirely wooden building. So I had to spend the night cowering in a freezing cold building whilst praying no mobs would get in and having to put out little fires lest my house burn to the ground and I'd die to the mobs outside. It wasn't a fun night in any way. In the morning, when I spotted the first beautiful rays of sun, I literally cannot express the happiness and relief I felt. So I took my first look outside after the carnage of last night, having to put down this hellhound looking thing before finishing up looting the village and heading out, because the loot here was pretty terrible. However, with it having a waystone, it did expand my foothold in this hellish world. Shortly after leaving the village, I stumbled across a little camp nearby that probably had much better loot than their entire village. Now, I ended up actually hanging around here for most of the day, just having a quick look around and sorting out my inventory as well as cooking up some more water. And eventually heading back out in search of the next thing that would come as me being stranded outside in the rain, having to hide in this puny little small shack right here because I'd left my sleeping bag back at the village and had absolutely no way to skip the night. So I just hid away, hoping for day to break as soon as possible. And as soon as it did, the search for loot continued, and so did the rain, still not letting up from last night. After running all morning and not finding much other than this little house under a very dark cliff with some pretty garbanzo loot, I took a little walk through a fairy village or whatever the hell this thing was. It was kinda cool, but then found another nearby village holdout and decided to be a nice guy for once and free them from their blocky prisons, taking their gold block as payment. Shortly after leaving, the rain finally stopped and I found some more random armor stands just scattered around. I also started thinking that winter was coming because everywhere I looked, the trees were turning brown and I was really hoping not to get caught out in a snowstorm, and began thinking of ways to keep warm. Now, this dragon would have kept me warm for about 5 seconds before it killed me, so it's not really the solution. Enough about that though, because I found another one of the 4 tower dungeons and went around breaking some of the spawners on the outside until I heard the inhabitants inside grunting and wanted no part in this place just yet. So I swiftly ran away, finding a broken up battle tower nearby that had a few of these annoying swines nearby it. Once they were dealt with, I set up a little camp next to the tower and waited until sunrise. In the morning, I went to check up on the battle tower that actually ended up being the single easiest walk in the park way I've gotten loot and XP to date. There was absolutely 0 mobs in here with a whole bunch of spawners that I broke, just getting an absolute ton of XP for free. It was actually insane how good this was. After looting up the tower, I did stumble across another fairy village, but this time it was out on the water and didn't really seem safe to me, but I guess they can fly, so it's fine. Then right next to the fairy village, found this very Halloween-y looking house that had some unwanted guests inside. So I just went making my way through, taking them out and looting up any things that I could find. But that was until I found the horrors that were lurking within the attic. There was a ton, and I mean a ton, of wither skeletons up here with a couple of spawners in the back. But luckily for me, these guys were like 9 foot tall and can't fit through 2 block wide holes, so I just kind of farmed them out for a little while before heading up there and getting rid of the spawners, securing even more easy XP and spending the night here. Waking up on day 56, I left the house in search of a way back home, because I'd been out for quite a while now and was starting to run out of inventory space. And also I didn't want to die all the way out here with this many levels. Eventually I ended up spotting a pirate ship that when I headed headed over to had a village next to it. So I took the ship on for even more easy loot and XP, then headed over to the village to find it completely abandoned, with its only inhabitants being skeleton and zombie horses. Now even with the village being abandoned, there was still a waystone. So I took it home and then spent the rest of the afternoon sorting through all my loot. And then that evening enchanted a whole bunch more books in hopes of getting anything that sounded cool or useful. After exploring for a while, on the following couple days I did some small bits of landscaping around the village just to make things look a little bit nicer and be a little bit more user friendly when it comes to moving around. As well as leveling up my agility again, unlocking the ability to jump off walls. And that's probably about it. I really took it easy for a couple days. After my landscaping days, I started out day 59 right by making a reforging station and I threw my diamond chestplate in there in hopes of making it better. And also decided to scrap my saber and shield, instead making a halberd, because the damage and range is just so much better that I think it's definitely worth the trade-off. Then I handed in all the quests that I completed to this point, getting rewarded with a whole bunch of just absolutely useless cosmetics for my troubles, you gotta love it, threw a sheep on my head, and then headed back to the recently found abandoned village where I found Juan again, but he wasn't looking in the best shape this time around. Then I continued on venturing again, and now you may notice that I'm still using a saber and shield, and well, I don't really know why. I think I was waiting to enchant the halberd, so that's probably why, but either way, it was back to exploring, where I ended up finding another village, and this time an actually functioning one. So I immediately went and looted up the library, getting efficiency 4, sharpness 3, unbreaking 3, and another fortune 2 book. So it was a pretty good place, but once again still not knowing of the hidden chest. Then I threw all the books in one of my crates, before then looting up the rest of the village, getting some pretty mid loot, activating the waystone, adding another stop to our expanding catalogue, as well as another crate to our inventory, and then taking refuge in one of these houses for the night. Then on day 60, I spent the morning grabbing all of the easily accessible wool from this place, and then headed over to a nearby big tree that wasn't one of the mega big ones, but was still bigger than average. So I made my way up it, having to do a little bit of parkour, but managed to skip most of it and got some free loot in the process that included 9 standard golden apples. So definitely not bad for pretty much no work. After exploring the weird tree and taking all the loot that I could find, I made my way back down to cook up some maca meat when this bird opened fire on me and really started messing me up. So I just fell back and took it on from a distance, but apparently shooting its quills at me wasn't enough because when it died, it decided to spawn in a reaper. Once peace was restored in the village, I went back to cook up some maca meat and returned home to trade up some more string. And then that night, reforged my halberd because the build quality really wasn't great, and managed to get it pretty good, adding a little bit more range to it. But then I heard a weird noise and it scared me, so I went to bed. In the morning, it was time to enchant my halberd. Now, the initial table enchants weren't great, but I did add sharpness 3 and unbreaking to it, so now I think it's a little bit better than my saber and will only get better as time progresses. So I leveled up and then took it out for a test, two-shotting a horse that still isn't great, but hey, the damage and range is definitely better than what we had before. After testing it out, I did a couple more trades with a nearby villager, leveling up my agility some more so that I can finally use the last upgrade that I can get for now, which allows me to clamber up 2-block high jumps. And then finally went back home and crafted up 2 heart containers with the crystal that I collected from the dungeons. I know, right? It took long enough. Now, I'm not sure exactly what I did after this, but I think I accidentally stopped recording, so I'm gonna guess it wasn't super interesting. Day 62 was an absolutely massive day for me because I actually figured out how things work up in here and crafted some baubles and reforged them to give me more hearts when equipped. I also realized that the quiver that I've been holding onto this entire time was in fact a bauble and would have been super useful to actually equip, so I just reforged it like the other ones to give me even more health, and yeah, I'm an absolute idiot. But I'm learning things now, so woo! Now, crafting and upgrading all these things felt really good because, I mean, I was getting just 3 extra hearts. But it did end up taking all day because at points I did run out of leather and had to go on a killing spree to get more. But hey, I'm not complaining. It was an extremely progressive day, and by the end of it, I had 4 extra hearts. And, well, I know that's not much in the grand scheme of things, but hey, it's better than none, and I do intend to get more. On day 63, I went out exploring again with my new gear to see what I could try and take on now, when I ended up in an area that I thought I recognized, but didn't really pay much attention. Until I actually found an area that I had unmistakably been to before because I remembered the dragon that resided there. So now knowing exactly where I was, I made my way back to my old little house and over to the battle tower next to it to see if I could take it on now. But once I got there, I actually discovered why it was so hard initially, and that's because that there's another completely different dungeon linked to it underneath. And that's definitely not what I signed up for, so I ended up leaving because, well, I wasn't feeling too confident to take that other one on. And just made my way over to the nearby village, taking the waystone back to where I started the journey today, making it pretty much pointless. After sleeping through the night, in the morning I headed back out in the opposite direction to yesterday to make sure that I didn't run into the same area again. And this would prove to be both a really good decision and maybe one of the worst I've ever made. But more on that later. For now, I found another villager camp with the just standard villager camp loot, and after running for quite a while, I found this really weird looking building in the middle of this plains biome, and I mean, it had some okay loot, but nothing really special. But I did pick my first lock here, so that was something, although the loot from the chest inside was really not worth it. One more abandoned village and it's waystone later, and the sun was just starting to go down as I found another villager mansion. So naturally I went in and cleared it out of all its loot, but here's where the bad decision came into play. You see, I'm pretty sure it's now winter and I'm in one of the coldest biomes with no way to keep warm, and it began snowing. So obviously I started getting colder and colder and colder until I got hypothermia, and I tried everything that I could right here, even cooking up some food to try and keep warm, but nothing worked. So I had two opportunities. One is guaranteed death if I stay here, or two, a very slim chance of survival if I leave and hope for the best. So leave I did, absolutely tearing through my supply of gapples in a mad panic to try and find somewhere to get warm. And well, in this weather and biome, the only place to probably do that is going to be lava. And against all odds, I actually ended up finding a lava pool not too long after leaving the mansion. So I sprinted over to it and headed underground to hide away from the nearby mobs, while spending the night under here, cowering, hoping not to die by mobs, and barely being able to keep warm. It was by far probably the worst night I've ever had. When the sun arose on day 65, I bucked it out of that little hole as fast as possible and started running in the direction where I thought the village was, bringing some lava from the pool with me for in case I got really cold along the way. Now luckily I ended up finding the village pretty easily, but it was also freezing again, so I had to use the lava to stay warm. Once I was warm enough, I grabbed the lava back up and went to the waystone, heading back home and then setting up a warming spot in my basement because it's even freezing over here where I live now and I cannot catch a break. After warming up again, I headed over to the only place I knew still had some wool, and that was the small camp next to my village. So I grabbed up enough to make a full set of armor and headed back home to craft it up, and now we can actually be outside for quite a while without freezing to death. By the morning of day 66, the storm had passed and, well, it was actually quite pleasant again, although a little bit cold. So now, after actually having some protection to the weather, I decided to return to the mansion that almost turned me into a living icicle, and it's a good thing that I came back here because the loot was pretty good, giving me infinity for my bow, which was really massive, and then begrudgingly decided to spend the night here because it was getting dark. And then on day 67, I left the mansion and set out back to the nearby village to return home. Then once I arrived at the village, I spotted a baby Juan before heading back home. Now, whilst I was sorting through all the loot that I got yesterday, I heard some really loud noises again, and well, then I had a whole bunch of vegetables come and start invading my village. And if that wasn't enough, that night a blood moon came in and just made everything 10 times worse. So I just had to sit in my house all night and listen to the chaos that was going off outside, hoping that something wouldn't come blasting through my window. After the ruckus from last night had ended, I stored away my loot and threw my snowy gear back on because I guess I'm just not done exploring yet. And off I went, finding another broken down battle tower that I cleared out for the XP, and well, it was just as easy as the first one, but nowhere near as lucrative. After clearing it out, I found another strange house thing, and well, almost all the chests in this one were locked. But after leaving, couldn't believe my luck as I found yet another villager mansion. But this time before entering it, I put my wool armor back on because I'm not getting caught in the same situation again. Now, as usual, the loot in these things is pretty good, especially for medical supplies and XP tomes. After looting everything inside up, I spent the night there. And then on day 69, I headed over to the desert near the mansion because I spotted a dragon skeleton over there. After 69 days of hoping to find one and not seeing any, I then end up finding 3 just scattered around the sand dunes of this desert. So I grabbed all of their bones and skulls and then continued on my journey, taking out groups of these red joust on my way that just brought me so much joy. Now, I was actually loving my time out here in the desert. It was really nice to not be, freezing to death and just having to, remain in a lovely warm atmosphere. It was really good, and it made me kind of want to move over here, but I never will. Now, I did actually end up finding a waystone out here along with one of these windmill villages that I found earlier, and well, I'm going to tell you, it's a really good thing that I didn't risk my life for the one back at the beginning, because the loot in these things was absolutely abysmal. It was so bad, in fact, that I headed over to a nearby anthill to see if they had anything better, but once I took a look inside and killed a group of them that came out, I realized that was way too creepy for me to go in right now. When I left the anthill to continue exploring the desert, I realized that I didn't have a bed on me, and so I had to just run back to the farm real quick to spend the night. I immediately left on day 70 and made my way through the desert until I spotted a little raft just offshore that I was very hesitant whether or not to go to after the incident earlier. I eventually got the confidence to head over to it, and wow, the loot over here was pretty bad, especially with the potential death on the way over here. Not worth it at all. After looting that place up, I managed to get myself back on track and made my way through the rest of the desert, finding a plains biome with another waystone. Then found another nearby villager mansion, but actually recognized this one as the one that saved me earlier after my big death to the sea serpent. So I guess things have come full circle. Now, after deciding that there was probably not going to be much loot over here, I just headed home. Once I got back, I placed down the dragon heads at my front door, crafted another diamond halberd, and enchanted it to combine with my current one, making it even more OP. Now, the new enchants weren't the greatest, but it's definitely not bad to combine together with the old ones to make it a little bit more powerful. However, I didn't get the enchants that I'm actually looking for, which are either vampirism or lifesteal, because they're just super OP and will drastically improve my survivability whenever I'm in fights. Once I combined the two halberds, I sorted away my remaining XP and loot before heading to bed. As I was leaving my house on day 71, I jump scared myself with the dragon heads that I placed down yesterday, and it got me thinking about flying mounts and the fact that I want one. Specifically a rock, but to get one of those will take a little time, and by that I mean I completely forgot that I wanted one until later. So instead, I ended up spending almost all day just wandering around the area near my village and eventually finding a new battle tower that was kinda close by, and I thought that it would be a pretty good way to test out my new stuff. So I slept outside before heading in the morning, taking on the floors with relative ease, even taking down a bunch of blighted mobs whilst being in here that didn't actually put up too much of a fight. Although I do guess I was cowering away from them behind a wall, but I wouldn't have dreamt of taking one of these on a few days ago. And besides, so long as they die and I get the XP, I don't really care, because the XP that these guys drop is extremely good. So after taking on most of the floors and getting some very nice XP and loot, I left because I didn't want to risk taking on the boss just yet. And for some reason, I think at this point in the video, I thought that I was in hardcore, so I just kind of played everything really carefully. I don't know, I've played too much hardcore Minecraft to play regular Minecraft anymore. But either way, after leaving the battle tower, I spotted this absolutely massive looking structure. And I mean, when you see something like this, you've just got to go and check it out, and that's exactly what I did. Now, to my surprise, when I made my way in there wasn't a billion mobs in there waiting to kill me, and instead was more gold blocks than a man like me will ever need. And what makes it all the better is in this version of the game, you could still craft god apples. So I did the only logical thing I could do right now and spent the next couple of days just tunnel visioned on mining up as many gold blocks as possible, that I would then in future craft into god apples and just win at life. Now, if the gold wasn't enough to make this place the best thing I've found so far, there was also a whole bunch of emeralds up high that I also grabbed because I'm gonna take the free XP from villager trades. Now, I did actually look this place up on the wiki, and from what I could find, it's kind of a rare structure, and I can definitely see why due to the sheer amount of stuff you can get from it. So I'm curious, let me know down in the comments if you've ever played RLcraft and you found this thing, because it's absolutely crazy. So after I gathered up my fill of gold blocks and emeralds for now, it was time to head back home and start putting them to work, remembering where this structure is for future uses. Once I got back to add the cherry on top of the legitimate stack of golden apples the past couple of days have been, I enchanted up a bunch of books, getting lifesteal 2 on one of them, so I immediately threw that bad boy on my halberd. On day 75, it was time to put those emeralds to use. So I found a guy to trade with and just went over and over and over again, stacking up on as much XP as possible. Plus, this trade works as a twofer because I managed to get a bunch of XP along with a whole bunch of apples that will very soon become much more than their regular selves. But before I craft the apples, I headed back to all the villages that I visited previously with big libraries and went and got all their secret chests finally, getting a whole bunch of extra enchanted books and even some enchanted diamond armor. And on that topic, I did some more enchanting of my own on another halberd and my bow, as well as reforging it to be better because it was pretty bad before. And finally, after all the trading, enchanting and reforging was done, I was able to make an entire stack of enchanted golden apples because I'm just that OP now. Quick note though, they're not as OP as they are in vanilla because they did get heavily nerfed, so they don't make you as unkillable, but they're still pretty nice to have. On day 78, after completely decking myself out over the past few days, I was ready to fight something and see what I can actually take on. So I made myself a new summoning staff and went out looking for a fight and thought that the desert would probably be the best place to find one. But I was wrong and it wasn't. However, I did find out that this entire time I could have been getting XP from crops, although it wasn't that much, so I guess it doesn't really matter. After that discovery, I continued on my crusade through the desert, absolutely decimating this poor Joust and his little friends who tried running away, but met the same fate as this guy over here, who got absolutely one-tapped by my new bow. Now, needless to say, I was feeling pretty strong right now, but still had a rough idea of what my limits were, but I guess I didn't want to pay attention to them right now because I decided to take some pot shots at a dragon that I then very quickly proceeded to run away from because I really don't think I'm ready to do that just yet. I think I need to fly to take one of those on. In the morning, I headed over to a nearby underground dungeon, hoping to be able to take it on, and well, there were a few scary things down here, but I did some big brain strats, aka just standing on higher levels than the mobs and fighting them from above, and things actually ended up going really smoothly. The only scary thing being taking damage, because in my head I still feel like I'm going to get one shot by the simplest of mobs. Now obviously that's not the case, but it was kind of weird just being able to tank some stuff. After tearing my way through this place and popping a few gapples freely due to how easily accessible they are and getting some really nice XP and drops along the way, this place was super fun, but eventually it came to an end because I couldn't find any more places to explore or things to kill. So I made my way back up top, seeing daylight for the first time in a good little while, and decided that my urge to fight was still there. So it was back to exploring for the day, making my way through the rain, finding another villager camp, but felt generous this time and didn't steal their gold block due to having a pretty big reserve of them now. So I just continued on exploring until I found this really nice looking village/town thing that put where I live to shame. So I activated the waystone over here, but didn't end up staying long because I wanted to go and test something out. However, I couldn't easily do it in the rain, so I headed to bed and in the morning began my experiment. Hey, so Future Poppers here to save you some time. This was a complete and utter waste of time. I tried shooting down a dragon from a distance and it didn't work. It was literally the biggest waste of time ever because none of the shots were registering and the arrows like despawned when they got too far away, and I just kept trying it over and over and over again, getting absolutely nowhere. So yeah, day 81, very bad day. Let's get away from it, move on to day 82. Oh, for God's sakes, man, leave the dragons alone. You can't kill it, it's too far away. Luckily this time I didn't spend all day shooting at it and must have got the message, and instead spent the day running through the wilderness again in search of everything and nothing. Now I can definitely tell you that I found something, and that something was a dragon right in my face. Now I'm convinced that if it wasn't for this gapple right here, I would have become a lot less alive really quickly, and I still don't really know how I survived this, but I did, and I'm definitely not going to complain. After that close call yesterday, I went looking for a way to get back home because I really need a flying mount to progress further now. So after running through the same forest that I'd seen a million times at this point and scaling a mountain, I didn't find a way home, but instead this Greek looking temple that I decided to take a look down inside, but very quickly realized that looking is probably the last thing I should be doing right here. Because down in this room was a gorgon, and if you don't know, if you look at these things, they'll turn you to stone and kill you real quick. So best to avoid eye contact. That was really easy for me because I just acted like myself IRL and turned the social anxiety up to 11, only taking brief little glimpses without suffering the wrath. After getting a few good hits in, she went down and I took her head as a trophy. That would be an extremely useful weapon in the right hands. However, mine are not those hands because I turned this poor innocent snow-dwelling creature to stone, immediately wasting it, not even 20 blocks from the temple. Great job, Poppers, but it was my lucky day because I found another temple nearby and quickly headed down for another socially awkward date with a gorgon. After getting the new head, I promise I won't waste it on any innocent creature just passing by, no matter how tempting. I wonder what's in store for us on day 84. Oh my day, bro, stop trying to hit the dragon. Right, let's not show any more of this, okay? It's embarrassing at this point. I didn't get the message. I still shot at them, alright? And instead, let's look at this lovely footage of me killing some trolls in a cave for their leather, so that I can actually make a saddle and get a flying mount. Yeah. After stealing what is essentially their skin, I headed back to the surface and began making my way back in the direction of home. Or at least I hoped it was anyway. Hey, would you look at that? I was right, but I'm going to be real honest with you right here. I had absolutely no clue which way it was. I just took a guess and it ended up paying off. But now I'm back and I'm ready to get myself a rock. So I cooked up the very small amount of silex fish I had on me and crafted up some avian treats. But this amount is going to do absolutely nothing and we're going to need a hell of a lot more. Now I also made a soul gazer because my last one's still lost at sea, And after crafting that, I went out hunting for some silex fish to start a little farm of them, and found 2 pretty quickly, bringing them back into the far corner of the village lake, trapping them in there, and then breeding them. And then I just waited up all night in hopes of a rock spawning, but had no luck. Then in the morning, went out to breed the silex some more when I noticed that there was a small hole in their pond that they managed to escape through. So I had to lure them back in, and as punishment for them escaping, I spent the day hunting and killing down some of their friends. Then that night, waited up once again, and this time actually managed to get a rock to aggro on me before heading to bed and trapping it in a boat on the following morning, so that now it can't go anywhere and I can actually begin supplying it with treats. Now, alongside soul gazing it, I did run out of treats pretty quickly, but we were making some progress, and well, he's just going to chill here. He really doesn't have much choice right now. After searching for some more silex and spending pretty much my entire day underwater again, I cooked up all the silex that I got, and then fed them to the rock, getting the knowledge rank 2, and now began to tame it. But that was going to take even more treats than I had. However, I did manage to get it halfway. So, with not being able to tame the rock right now, I just trapped him in a wooden box so that he wasn't in any danger. Day 88 was a big day. Huge day, actually. It started out with me grabbing the final silex I was going to need to finish taming up the rock and fed them to him, but he ended up needing one more. So after grabbing that and appeasing his hunger for now, I finally had myself a pet rock. And finally, a flying mount. So I broke him out of his wooden prison and threw the avian saddle on him, and boom! Now we can fly around. And this just opens up so many opportunities for us, it's actually insane. So now we can go anywhere and do so many more things. So I spent pretty much the entirety of the rest of the day in the air, passing by familiar places and finding new ones, like this village right here that had a pretty OP library with a load of enchanted books inside. There was actually a lot in here. But after taking all the goods, I hopped back on my rock and left in search of new places when I spotted a dragon in the middle of this field and decided it was time to finally put one down. So I opened fire, laying into it with arrow after arrow, until finally it went down and we had just secured our first dragon kill. So I wasted no time and immediately headed down to loot up all its scales and its heart, and then continued off exploring into the night, stopping off at this nearby villager camp to sleep. Then made my way back home on day 89, where I crafted some dragon scale armor and leveled up my defense as much as possible because I'm not high enough to wear it just yet, but didn't stick around the house long before taking to the skies again because this flying thing is extremely fun. And plus I like fighting dragons now, because I ended up putting my second one down with ease, although this one was much more tanky than the first one, but it did end up dropping me a bunch of bronze scales for spending half my day shooting at it, so that was quite kind of him. More aerial exploring later, and I found a new village, this time in a desert with a blacksmith and a worm problem that I stopped off to help with, and then just continued on flying throughout the day and into the night, until I found a roguelike dungeon on day 90 and decided to take it on. Now the loot in this thing was nice, but the XP was even better, and it didn't actually put up that much of a challenge to conquer thanks to my OP halberd. However, my halberd didn't save me from this fall that I thought was going to end in my death. However, it didn't, because there was a little bit of water down here to break my fall. After spending 9 years making a staircase back up, I kept progressing through the dungeon and looting up any chests I found along the way, as well as breaking any and all spawners for their XP. Now this thing just kept going deeper and deeper and getting a lot harder as the floors progressed. So when things got a little bit much, I decided to call it for now and return to the surface with the loot that I had, as well as stealing some fireworks from a nearby dispenser that was linked up to the dungeon, just for if one day I decide to get an elytra. Now whilst looking for a way back home, I ended up finding a new village with a librarian who was selling Supreme Smite 5, which is the first Supreme enchantment I'd seen so far. So that's pretty cool I guess, but I still don't think it's worth it. Now instead of taking the Waystone home like I was planning to, I just decided to keep exploring out here for some reason until I found another village with a big battle tower nearby and decided that that was going to be a fun thing to take on. So first thing in the morning, I headed into the tower and began absolutely shredding the mobs in here so easily. I mean, these guys just did not put up a fight. The halberd just does too much damage and lifesteal is insanely OP. It heals me through pretty much anything. It's absolutely insane. Now sadly, I did end up clearing this thing out pretty quickly and was pretty sad once I had, because it was super fun. But other than it being fun, it did have some pretty good loot in here, such as a multi-shot book for my bow that was going to make it output just so much more damage. After finally deciding to head back home, I got to work on sorting out my inventory and upgrading some of my gear, as well as creating some more stuff that I fully decked out in level 30 enchants that still weren't the best, but I think the dragon armor set is still quite a bit better than my current diamond stuff, so I'll take it. And finally, to end off day 92, I reforged one of my baubles, getting it to undying quality, which is the best you can actually get, giving me an extra extra heart, and then added multi-shot onto my bow that practically turned it into a flamethrower. On day 93, for some reason, I decided it was going to be a good idea to go hunting for bookworms, and specifically golden ones, so that way I can make a disenchanting table. But the problem with this is the fact that the spawn rate is 1%, and the likelihood of me getting any at this point is very slim. So after a while of searching a nearby biome where they can spawn, and unsurprisingly not finding any, I decided to head out to sea and get revenge for my death earlier by killing a sea serpent that did actually get super close to hitting me a few times because this guy did some absolutely insane flips out of the water. It was wacky. After getting my sweet vengeance and putting him down, I found a desert dungeon and started taking it on, making some pretty good progress, which was quickly stopped by a nearby dragon that was going to make things a little too warm for my liking. And with me not really having a counter to the heat out here right now, I decided to leave the desert for now, finding what I think was a massive sandworm just chilling underneath the sand whilst on fire. I was thinking about killing it, but had no clue how big it was, so decided against it. And instead found this here sky village that was really cool, although I have no clue why it generated like 100 blocks up in the air. After chilling with the sky villagers all night, in the morning I ended up finding this whole kingdom looking place that I noticed looked exactly the same as the structure that I spawned right next to, but thought it was a dungeon initially, so didn't go anywhere near it. So I do wonder how different things would have been if I'd have gone and found this place straight away. Things would have definitely been a lot easier at the start. But either way, this place was really nice, but didn't really have great loot for me at this point in the game. However, I was still happy to find a place like this because it might become my home at some point. After leaving the kingdom, I traveled for a little while before finding this Roman-looking temple, but didn't really have the chance to look around it because a dragon began burning it down and I wasn't in the mood to deal with that right now. Then that evening, took on a battle tower, killing the golem up top thanks to my very good boy Rock, who literally ran circles around this guy, making him an absolute joke to deal with. Once he fell, I spent the night sleeping on the sail of a nearby pirate ship, then going and gathering all the loot from the dungeon on the morning of day 95. Now, just look at this absolute mess of loot he left in here. It's an absolute state, and it took me a good while to sort through, but once I'd picked out all the things that I wanted, I got back on my rock and headed off to see what else I can take down. When I found this really strange looking building that got even stranger when I went inside, finding some cult-like stuff in here. See, I did warn you earlier about the Cthulhu cult stuff, alright? This is the result of this. I told you they're moving in everywhere. So I grabbed one of the heads and took it with me as a reminder to never come back here and scurried away pretty swiftly. Immediately finding an entire pirate cove looking island that was absolutely massive and had so many houses on it that it almost took me the entire night to find the waystone in this place. It really did put the kingdom that I found yesterday to shame. On day 96, I noticed that there was a dragon lurking nearby the island village that I just found, and I wasn't wanting to lose this place. So I just dedicated my morning into putting this flappy boy down and yoinking his scales to add to my collection. Now, I did take a quick look around this biome to see if I could spot any gold bookworms again, but obviously not because they're super rare to find. So I just went and repaired my bow, absolutely decimating another tower golem to get even more freezy loot from the coagulation on the floor. Once I was done with the tower, I found a house to spend the night, and as I was about to go to sleep, this guy blew up on me, not even leaving a singular scratch. However, the house didn't fare too well, and decided to take that as a sign not to sleep and just flew my way through the night. On day 97, I wanted to head back home and ended up finding a village under siege by a dragon that I just ended up luring away and then making a quick run for the waystone, making my way back home after what felt like a lifetime. Then began going through the copious amounts of loot I'd amassed over the past few days, as well as crafting a few more gapples to restock on them before going mining for the day. I don't know, I guess I wanted to be surrounded by the color grey or something. I just went mining. It was actually quite peaceful. Day 98 came around and I was back out exploring again for some reason, finding another village as well as like a billion dragons whilst being out here. I still really don't know why they're so common. But I really didn't do much on day 98 other than just fly around, and then that night took out a few blighted mobs to get a decent chunk of XP. As the clock was ticking for our time here in RLcraft, on day 99 I was feeling a little bit reminiscent of how things started, and angered by those who'd wronged me along the way. So I made my way back to the very first village that I found, and went hunting for the dragon who made me leave all those days ago. Now, he wasn't hard to find, still flying in the sky in the exact same place I last saw it. And now a battle of biblical proportions commenced. I hailed him with a barrage of arrows, and I mean, he did try to fight back, but it was pointless. I was just too fast, and before I knew it, the very thing that terrified me little under 100 days ago lay dead on the ground before me. So I lured him up, because bronze scales are really nice to have. They make really good armor. But my wrath was not over yet. There was one more old friend to check up on. So I began following the path and retracing my steps from the very beginning, returning to the fated spot where the McLaren P1 cleared me up earlier, not knowing if he was still there. But that was his last mistake, as he revealed himself trying to get a jump on me from behind. So I toyed with him for a little while, tanking a few of his pathetic attacks before finally putting an end to his speed limit breaking spree. And I also took some of his insides as trophies, heading back home and putting them on my wall. In the morning, I watched the final sunrise of my time here, before heading out and grabbing an armor stand from the blacksmith that saved my life earlier. Then returned home to hang up my armor, store away my weapons, and do a little bit of organizing for the day, before then pulling my weapons back out of storage to go and watch the final sunset, no longer feeling scared and powerless in a world filled with dragons and demons. So there it is, 100 days spent in RLcraft. And once again, if you'd like to see me suffer and lose my sanity trying to attempt this in hardcore, then let me know by dropping a like and a comment down below. But that's it from me today. So YouTube tells me that you're going to love the video in the top right, and if you want to see more videos similar to this one, then check out the 100 days playlist in the top left. Also, you should definitely follow me on Twitter. I never plug it, but that's the best place to get updates about the channel. Anyways, adios peeps.